content presented in this podcast is based on real events and may contain graphic descriptions of violence, sensitive topics, and explicit language that may be triggering, offensive, or sensitive subjects to some viewers and listeners. Discretion is advised. The purpose of this podcast is to explore and discuss true crime cases for entertainment and educational purposes only. This podcast does not intend to glorify or sensationalize crime, but rather aims to analyze and understand the complexities of human behavior in the criminal justice system. We encourage listeners to approach this content with empathy, critical thinking, respect for the victims and their families. Hi, welcome to another episode of Mysteries, Mayhem, and Merlot. I am your host, Winnie Schrader, and tonight I was kind of juggling around with this topic, and Dave told me, I have somebody who just wrote a book about that. I'm like, okay, great. And the topic that I was wondering about was, you have all these sensationalized cases, but with all the facts and opinions and myths and legends and all that stuff floating around, what is actually fact about the case? What are the myths? And what truth lies in those myths? Because usually there's a little bit of truth in every lie and every myth, right? Well, my guest Jeff Ignatowski thought the same exact thing, and he's nationally known speaker for psychology of serial killers, who turned this curiosity into the meticulously researched collection Beyond the Headlines: True Crime Myths and Legends. Jeff Ignatowski, welcome to the show.
Hello. How's it going, everybody out there?
Well, welcome to the show. Thank you for coming on. Dave brought this book to my attention, Beyond the Headlines, which, we always see those sensationalized headlines, and now it's known as clickbait. You know what I mean? But, it's like, what is actual truth? What's conjecture? What's opinion? And what's actually factual and evidence when it comes to these high profile cases? I mean,
Yeah, and it
go ahead.
yeah, it's so crazy right now, especially in
Uh-huh.
our culture today, how just like you don't know what to believe, right? There's so much out there, whether it's in the field of true crime or every other news media outlet. You just don't know what to believe. There's so much stuff out there, and there's so much propaganda. So it's
Mhm.
crazy, and it's amazing that we have forums like this where we can talk about that stuff, and we can uh, go through some of these ideas. So I think it's super cool. I love the intro, by the way. The intro is
Oh, thank you. The intro is done by the elusive Bart L. But yeah, he's done Dave's intro video, and I asked him to do mine, and he was willing to do it. So I was pretty grateful. But yeah, like for instance, you have the Casey Anthony case. That one was so sensationalized in the headlines that it was like, what's truth, what's not truth? And we got little snippets of what was happening in court. And then you come to find out she has a not guilty verdict. And it's like what they
yeah,
put out there in the news. How did she get off of that? You know what I mean? So that's why everyone's like, how could she? All the evidence. And it's like,
yeah.
how solid was that evidence? And
Well,
we look
I
back at old cases. Well, and you can't really prove it because of the DNA didn't exist, during Jack the Ripper days. Yeah. So my point is that having how does someone go about finding the actual facts and truth when there's so much myths floating around there when it comes to a high profile case?
So I think a lot of it is, just research. You have to look at the actual cases themselves. A lot of times, especially for myself, I know several of the people that were like directly involved with a lot of these cases. Obviously,
Mhm.
when you're talking about Jack the Ripper, I mean, there's a couple guys. There's actually one guy that I talked to that lives in the UK that is a Jack the Ripper expert.
Okay.
He's got some inside information. I guess he's been studying it for years and years. And a good
Oh.
friend of mine who's another podcaster introduced me to him. And it was really, really cool that we got to connect and talk about the case a little bit. And then actually, my friend who wrote the foreword for the book, E.J. Hammond, is a Bundy expert, and
Okay.
I was really really fortunate to also be able to talk to several other Bundy experts. Kevin Sullivan actually did some of the proofreading for the book, which was really great because he is like the preeminent Bundy guy. Like he has studied every document that there ever has been, all the court cases. He is very close with the family, so he has a lot of knowledge about the case, and it was really
Mhm.
great to get his insight into it. So I think a lot of it starts there. It's really doing good research, and then at the same time, like the way that I like to write, I don't like
Mhm.
to tell people like I don't like to give people conclusions because somebody asked me this like a couple weeks ago. Why do you write? Like, what is it that causes you to write? And for me, it's because I believe that our society uh, is short on critical thinking skills, and I feel
Oh,
like
yes.
in this forum, I get to help them like grow those critical thinking skills because of the way that I write. I give evidence, but I will give evidence from both sides, right? In the book,
Okay.
I will say, hey, here is a myth, and here is evidence for it. Here is evidence against it. Here's a bunch of resources that you can look at to dig in even further than what I'm saying, right? So I try not to give an opinion. I try to provide evidence because then people can start that process of self discovery for
Right.
themselves. And I think that that is an important part of the process when you're looking into cases and you're doing research and you're trying to understand it and trying to understand
Mhm.
people. If you're not coming to your own conclusions and you're just listening to some documentary or you're just listening to someone else's opinion, it doesn't mean very much. There's 1,000 podcasts out there that will give you their opinion on these cases. That doesn't matter because it's their opinion, right? They're not the arbiters of truth. The only person
Mhm.
that an opinion means anything to is you. So if you're able to discover it for yourself, to understand it, and actually in the book, I challenge people to like send me a message. Like if you have a different viewpoint on something, hit me up. Let me know. Let me know what your opinion is because that is part of my self discovery, right? I don't know everything. I don't understand every single case. And if you have extra information that I've not heard, that may help me. It may not change my opinion
Right.
because I may not agree with it, but it helps me to have a better, more well rounded, and more informed idea about the cases. And I think it's fascinating. And, I get to go around and go to all of these conventions and stuff that I do. And I hear so many stories about these different cases, some that I think are just way, way out there that don't make any sense at all. And
Right.
other ones that I think like, wow, there might be some plausibility to that. Maybe there is something there. Maybe I didn't think about that before. One of the other guys that got to read the book early on is a amazing, amazing guy connected with the Gacy case, and William Dorsch. Right, he is a former
Mhm.
retired Chicago police detective, and he consequently ended up being a whistleblower on the police force. He ended up leaving and retiring, and has since been kind of on a crusade to hold them accountable to some of the things that they did. They're actually doing a podcast now about the Guevara case. I believe that's how you pronounce his last name. But he
Mhm.
was a cop that had done a lot of dirty stuff. To date, they've exonerated like 44 people that he arrested and put in prison because of his dirty dealings. And he was
Wow.
right there in the middle of all of that and got to see it firsthand. And has, this guy is still out there, right? He's not, I don't believe he's a cop anymore. I think he's retired, but he has never like been, even brought into court on some of the things that he's done. So
Really?
it's wild to see that. But Bill gave me like love the book, and said that there were a lot of things that I discussed in the book that he hadn't even considered. And this is a guy
Wow.
that's a detective, like in the police force for 30 years. Just incredible guy. So
Win for Jeff. That's a win
yeah,
for Jeff. Yeah, I mean that's great because yes, critical thinking is completely lacking in today's society whether it comes with true crime or especially in politics. I just don't
oh
get
yeah,
started on that one. But yeah, I mean everybody they think whatever they see in front of their face as they scroll is truth. And I mean, just for instance, like all these hoax celebrity deaths. I mean, people will
oh yeah,
sit there and share a post, and I'm like, they're still alive. Why? And my go-to, and I'm not plugging it, but if a TMZ hasn't posted, it hasn't happened yet. That's just
yeah,
my
yeah,
go-to when it comes to celebrity deaths is TMZ. But yes, for what you were saying is that people just kind of take it for what they see in front of them and they don't dig further. They don't even explore their own ideas. It's almost like
yeah,
it's just this false information in their head and they just don't know what to do with it. They just repeat it and they don't even know why. And
yeah.
critical thinking is a huge part of trying to decipher whether you're talking about the psychology of serial killers. Why do gang members initiate the others by randomly murdering people? Like, why does this happen in our society? And I think it's pretty cool that you've done a book like that where it engages the reader. And I'm definitely going to get your book because that sounds like a fun task for me to do. It's so awesome. You actually gave your readers homework. Bravo to
Absolutely.
you.
I do my
It's
best.
us.
It-
Yeah.
so
Okay. Oh, go ahead.
it's funny because the book itself,
Uh-huh.
kind of the intention for writing it, because it is 3 volumes. This is just the first volume, right? And
Mhm.
so I wrote it because I wanted to get people to understand that true crime is not just about Ted Bundy and Jeffrey Dahmer
Right.
and BTK. That true crime encompasses everything, right? And the
Mhm.
example that I always give is if you go out to Walmart right now and you go and steal a TV and they catch you, you have committed a true crime because it happened in like the real world. So it
Mhm.
was true and you broke the law, which makes it a crime. And
Right.
so people don't understand a lot of times that true crime really encompasses a large, wide variety of things. So, of
Mhm.
course, to get interest, I had to start with serial killers. So, volume 1 is on serial killers, volume 2 is on criminals, and then volume 3 is on cults and religions. And
Ooh.
one of the things that I love to do is I have always enjoyed, like, I come from kind of a debate background, and
Mhm.
I love to play devil's advocate. And
Yes.
so I like to challenge people. So when we get into, like, for example, the end of the criminals book the last chapter is on Jeffrey Epstein,
Okay.
something that is really close to present day. There's a lot of questions about it. It's a very difficult topic because we're talking about, underage girls and all this crazy stuff that he did. And, this
Mhm.
island that may have had every like celebrity in the last 30 years hanging out with him. And so, I want to look at stuff like that that's going to challenge people, that's going to get them to really look at like the really bad shit that happens around us. Consequently, when I hit cults and religions, I will
Mhm.
cover Satanism, and we'll talk about Anton LaVey. We'll talk about Aleister Crowley and occultism, and all the ridden sex parties that he had. And
Right.
then we'll also talk about the Catholic Church, who has a
Mhm.
long history of doing all kinds of stuff that was not necessarily Christian. So,
Right.
we're going to hit everybody because I believe that if you're going to sling it, you ought to do it equally. So I'll give it to
Right.
everybody, and we'll dredge up all the dirty things, and we'll talk about them and discuss it. And I'll try to not be 150,000 words, maybe.
Okay. Well, when it comes to like myths of like and we'll talk about like some examples of like what's true and what's not true with certain serial killers, but when it comes to the actual definition of a myth, um there is a grain of truth usually that lies in a lie or a myth or legend or lore. So how do you decipher going through cases knowing like, okay, how do you decipher what to pick out that may be myth and what can be picked out that could be factual or true?
So I think, you know, so the title of the book is Beyond the Headlines, right?
Uh-huh.
And so I think sometimes the way that I picked out the titles for the myths and stuff really were like that. They're a headline, right? They're
Hmm.
something to grab people's attention to be like, hey, I don't know how I feel about that. I think that might
Hmm.
be bullshit. And so I
Right.
think that it's important to have that headline, right? And so for me, I've always kind of defined myth as not necessarily a lie, right? In our common American culture, we say when you say myth, it's a myth that somebody did this, and it's always kind of a negative thing. But in
Right.
truth, the word myth comes from the Greek word mythos, which just means a story, right? It has no positive or negative connotation. It is just simply a story about someone or something that explains things. So, when we look at all these myths and legends in antiquity, like the Greek myths and Greek mythology, you know, are, when we look at serial killers, do they qualify? I would say yes, because a lot of those people in our own culture, in our American mythology, have become cultural icons, right?
Right.
They may not be positive cultural icons, right? Because they're infamous people, but
Right.
they do hold this certain place that people look at them like they are mythological figures now. And that happens with people, even in our own lifetimes, that may impact our world in such a way that there is now all this, we build up these ideas about who they were or how they became to be who they became.
Hmm.
And so I think it's important to go and look at that stuff and kind of decipher that to see what's really there. Like, is that correct? What is the
Right.
truth behind that? And so I think that looking at it from that viewpoint, it's not as negative as you might think a myth would be. And it's so funny, like in the English language, we use a lot of words that don't make any sense at all. If I say bad, right?
Hmm.
It could mean 40 different things depending on how you're saying it, what the
Right.
emphasis is on it. Bad in the 80s was you bad some bit, right?
Yeah,
That
it was
was
cool.
bad back then. Yeah, it was cool. But, if I'm saying like the dog has been bad, I'm not obviously not using it in the same connotation. And so I
Right.
think that again, as we dig in and become uh, more critical thinking, we need to understand that words don't always just mean what we perceive them to mean. Ultimately,
Hmm.
the truth is that words only mean the meaning that we give them, whatever it is, right? We
Right.
choose that meaning. And so I choose to do it that way, which is why in the preface we talk about the definition of a myth and a legend, and then we use
Right.
that throughout the book. The great thing is that when you write something, you can set the meaning.
Hmm. Well, and one thing I've always wondered too is like, do some of these myths and stuff come about because people are trying to rationalize and grasp the actual crime itself?
For
Because it
sure.
could be so, you know what I'm saying? Like, how else would this happen other than that he turned into this monster that had,
Yeah.
2,000 teeth and bit their heads off?
Yeah.
Like, or could it come about from people trying to solve the case? And I'm it's harder to do that with today with forensics and all that, but like for Jack the Ripper or some of these cases, Bathory, Elizabeth Bathory,
Yeah.
there was no way to, catalog and get this evidence with blood and all that. So, how does somebody kind of wrap their head around that and focus on those parts when there's no actual evidence to support their
So it's
to the
interesting.
myth, I guess.
It's interesting because the Bathory case, there actually is
Mhm.
a good bit of evidence, right?
Okay.
There are specific court documents that they did during the time when they had her on trial, and they interviewed something like 300 people, right? Now, of course,
Mhm.
we know that during that time, there was a lot of political pressure, right? Because a lot of the people that were in that area wanted what she had, right? She had all of these lands and stuff. So there's a high propensity that the reason why they went in there and went after her is because they wanted all of her land and her wealth and her money. Her husband was dead. He was gone, and they figured that they could get that. And consequently, they did. They ended up taking everything that was hers. So you wonder how much of that was actually written in those court documents is actual. But it's interesting
Uh-huh.
because there are certain things in those court documents that came up that are very mythological, right? Like her bathing in blood, the stories of vampirism and things like that, that are
Mm,
never talked about in the court reports. Like they
okay.
never talk about her bathing in blood. And I
Really?
think that that's interesting because if that now they talked about all kinds of torture and they talked about, like the stories of her covering people with honey and letting the bugs eat them. That apparently happened. The times where they were sticking hot pokers in different women and stuff, that apparently happened. But when you get to the bathing in blood, there is no evidence for that at all. And that is like
Oh,
the number one thing when we think about Elizabeth Bathory is that she bathed in the blood of virgins. It's what all the movies
right.
are about, but that in and of itself, probably not historical. She probably
Well,
didn't do
see,
that at all. She may have
wow.
killed 30 or so handmaidens. That could be true. But the idea that she killed 600 people, probably not true at all, which is funny
Right.
because she currently holds the Guinness World Record for killing the most people, right? And
Mhm.
it's funny that that would be the case, that Guinness says that, and they're supposed to do all this research, right? And the truth is, when you look at the historical records, she probably didn't kill any more than 30 or 40 people. I don't know.
Wow.
But so, that's literally the first chapter of the book. I talk about a bunch of that. I think the vampirism thing, the theories behind that are really interesting because
Mhm.
it is not very far from the time of Vlad the Impaler, right? Where all of the stories of Dracula come from. And you
Yeah.
wonder how much the story of Elizabeth Bathory factored into Dracula. And if there
Mhm.
isn't a bunch of crossover, because they happened during a similar time, the book that Bram Stoker wrote was much later than that. And how much did he draw from all of the stories from Elizabeth Bathory? So
Right.
it's interesting. I don't know the answer to that, but I think it's an interesting thing to look into, and that's something that I cover in the book. I talk a bunch about that, but it's a fascinating thing.
Right. I mean, I'm so intrigued now. I just want to go down this rabbit hole about Elizabeth Bathory and now Vlad the Impaler. I'm going to be up until 5 a.m. But yeah, that is a perfect example because it's almost like yeah, people are kind of grasping little bits from all these different stories and creating this whole new narrative and this whole new story. And it's kind of the same thing, when you think about the story of like let's say the werewolves or something, but there might be something that crosses over into the vampire world that's similar than the werewolf world that they've kind of carried over. So it's almost like it's the same base story. They're just changing the characters throughout
Yeah.
time.
Well,
And that's what they do with true crime in some of these
yeah.
legends and lores, except Ed Gein. I don't know how much more you can make up than what he did, because that is probably got to be the most disturbing case. Him and Ed Kemper are probably the most disturbing cases
So
I've ever looked into.
so Ed Gein is interesting because there is
Yeah.
so much in that
Oh.
case that is absolutely wrong, right?
Oh.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that we commonly believe about Ed Gein that is just not true. And that one is fascinating because he is literally influenced like almost every genre of horror that you could be in.
Yes.
And so like I cover in the book every movie that was based on Ed Gein, and I go through a little synopsis of it, how he influenced that movie, and there's like 17 or 18 of them that I go
Right.
through in the book. And so
Oh
it's
yeah.
fascinating to me that when people in the horror community like look at me like, how could you? I could never watch that true crime stuff. And I'm like, you realize that 90% of your horror is based on something that actually happened, right? And they're like,
Right.
yeah, but that's just too close for me. And I'm like, hold on. You would rather lie to yourself about the reality rather than understand the reality. Like,
Right.
don't you understand how much more dangerous that is? Like the lie is
Oh.
so much worse because people get desensitized by watching all this crazy gore and shit on there. And we
Mhm.
know for a fact that that influences people. Look at what happened around the Slender Man stuff, right? Is just one of those stories. It's a completely fictitious story. A guy made it up. And, this
Mhm.
is our real American mythology, right? He makes up this story, and these kids like embrace this story and end up killing a girl because of this whole Slender Man idea. And it's
Mhm.
almost like when you watch like creepy pasta and stuff. It's almost like they literally brought this idea to life, and that
Mhm.
is scary, right? So we have all of these things that are not even possible. And you mentioned earlier, which I thought was really interesting, about werewolves, and that is not
Mhm.
so dissimilar from Bigfoot, right? And if you go in
Mhm.
every different region, there are different Bigfoots in different regions, right? You have the Yeti, and you have the North American this, or and so
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
you know, are they there? Maybe. I don't know. I haven't seen one, but I know plenty. I know plenty of people that claim to have seen a
Right.
Bigfoot. We hang around in the paranormal community, and that is right there with it. And I think
Mhm.
cryptids are fascinating. But again, it is really, really part of our American mythology. There may come a time where I need to add like an addendum to the book and add cryptids in there because I love researching that too.
Oh, I know, right? And there's probably crimes that cryptids have committed, because instead
There
of the devil made
are.
me do it, Bigfoot made me do it. And that is
Yep.
so funny because I'm not kidding you. One day I was leaving a store, and this man he was panhandling, and if I had cash, I would have given it to him just for his signage that cracked me up and entertained me for the next like 4 hours. But he said that Sasquatch stole his children and was asking for ransom money. And I'm like, "Oh, Bigfoot, now he's dipping into the true crime realm. Don't do that, dude. Just stay in your lane. Just go stay in the woods. Don't be doing kidnapping
Golly.
children here." But we gotta take a break. We got to take a quick break. But when we come back, we'll kind of talk about some of those myths, like what is actually true and what's false. Because, like with Ed Gein, did he really have lampshades made out of the human skin of women that he murdered? Things like that. Was that true? Was that embellished? Or is that actual fact and evidence that was brought into the case? So we'll take a quick break and we'll be right back.
Did you know that radio just got a little extraterrestrial? That's right, Dave Schrader is back on radio with the Paranormal 360 every Sunday evening, 7 to 9 p.m. Central on WCCO AM 830, an Odyssey station. Just download the Odyssey app and look for the WCCO logo, follow the station, and listen live. That's the Paranormal 360 on WCCO AM 830, an Odyssey station. Hey, you, come here. Winnie Schrader here from Mysteries, Mayhem, and Merlot podcast, and I got a little secret to share with you. Are you an author, podcaster, comedian, or an online seller that needs a little help in the digital creation department? Well, I'm your hired gun. From graphics, book covers, press kits, radio tours, merch designs, audio editing, podcasting, and producing. Sure, you can do it all yourself, but all those design tools and stuff to make your promotion pop adds up. CapCut Pro, $8 a month. Canva Pro, $15 a month. ChatGPT 4, $10 a month. Midjourney, $10 a month. Adobe Audition, $23 a month. Plus, you have to do all the editing and all the tedious stuff that comes along with being a digital creator, author, or comedian to help promote yourself. That's where I come in at a lower cost than similar competitors, because I know the anxiety and stress that it takes to make your mark in the world on a mac and cheese budget. You'll get one-on-one collaboration with me because this baby belongs to you, and I want to make sure what I'm doing is what you want and how you want it. For more information, visit wsmedia.press. The links are in today's description. Let me do all the legwork for you. That way you can focus on your passion. Again, the website is wsmedia.press, and let's just make some magic together.
And we're back. Okay, so before the break, we kind of alluded to what are some like myths and legends with these infamous killers and what's actual fact. So you've obviously done the research. We have Jeff Ignatowski, the author of Beyond the Headlines: True Crimes, Myth, and Legends, which we will have a link for Jeff's book in today's description guide, along with where you can find Jeff. Now, I am putting up his link tree because you do have a numerous amount of business or kind of things that you do that's all kind of tied between kind of paranormal and true crime and stuff like that. So it's really cool. So I'll have a link for that. But we'll just talk about that with the myths and what's true. So going through your research, what were kind of some of the ones that kind of shocked you that you found out was like completely a myth or something that was completely true?
So one of the things you already mentioned it, so we'll start there. The Ed Gein and the lampshades, absolutely
Yes.
false. He did
Really?
not have any lampshades. So when they took inventory of the barn and
Okay.
they found all of the items that he had, those are not on there. So one of the really cool places that you can go to is in Savannah, Georgia. There is a
Okay.
museum called Graveface there. A buddy of mine, Ryan Graveface, owns it, and he has a pretty good section and like a room built for Ed Gein, and it actually
Oh.
has a bunch of the transcripts and stuff up on the wall that you can read of some of the psychological reports and some of the different things. It actually has the actual crime scene photo of Bernice Warden, who is like, if you've seen Terrifier and
Yeah.
the girl that's hanging upside down, yeah, that is
Yeah.
basically what Dean had in the barn. But with that, there are no lampshades. There are no, now there were bowls, like
Yes.
chalices that were made out of skulls. There
Okay.
were gloves that were made out of skin. There was, he was trying to build like pants and stuff like that. but really the only furniture that he had were two
Oh,
chairs that had skin, like human skin on them. Now, those two chairs, if you didn't know, you would not, like, if you just sat in it, you wouldn't know that there was human skin there. Like, it was
oh
not
gosh.
like, it's not like, you see all these lampshades that are made and there's like an eyeball on there, or there's like a nose on the side of it. He didn't have anything like that. The nipple belt that we talk about, right? Everybody talks
Yeah.
about the nipple belt that Ed Gein had. Not part of his original, like that was not part of it. There
Ew.
is no nipple belt. So in reality, that was never part of it. Now they did find, I don't know, 10 vulvas in a box or in a coffee can. So they found all
Ooh.
kinds of body parts. But Ed Gein was a gravedigger, right? He did kill two
Mm-hmm.
women that we know of. There is the possibility that he killed more, right? But we don't
Yeah.
know that for sure. The other big thing about Gein that we all talk about is that Gein was a cannibal. Gein was not a cannibal. He never ate anybody. He was not interested in eating people.
Yeah.
He was interested in either reanimating his mother or creating a woman suit so he could become his mother, right? And his mother was
Yeah.
crazy. She was
Yes.
very much a religious zealot that was very, very
Mm-hmm.
condescending to him. Geen also may or may not have killed his brother. There's some speculation on that he may have. We don't know that for sure.
Really?
His brother did died, and Geen ended up finding the body. So, did he have anything to do with it? Did his brother just slip and fall, hit his head on a rock in the woods? I don't know. But
Yeah.
it's fascinating. There's also talk that Geen kidnapped and killed several children. We don't know that for sure. It also doesn't fit with Geen. When you look at his story, he loved kids. He babysat a lot of the kids in the neighborhood. So for
Oh
him
my
to go and
God.
start kidnapping them, probably not. But who knows?
Yeah.
He was also a model prisoner. When he was in the mental institution, they all loved him. He was a really nice guy
Oh, of
who also
course. They're
dug up
always
corpses.
charming. I know. I was like, what is he trying to do? Start his own interior decorating business? I mean, come on. Because everybody
Yeah,
made it sound like he had couches and chairs. And
no,
I knew he had the bowls because what he would use is the top of the
yeah,
skull for a bowl. That I know for sure happened because they had that as evidence that they took from the barn. But yeah, and
yeah,
that the way he had her hanging. I mean, he was in Wisconsin, and what do you do in the Midwest in the winter? You hunt, and he
yep,
basically skinned her and drained her and gutted her like a deer. Like that's how you
yeah,
would dress a deer. So that's what
yep.
he was doing. And oh God, that's so nasty to know that. I mean, it's kind of good to know that he didn't have lampshades, but it's like knowing that some of the chairs, yes, that was true. Oh God, and he watched people's kids. He watched
Yep,
people's children. How would
yep,
you feel after the fact knowing you set your kid there? Oh my goodness. Okay, well, let's
yeah.
go to another one. What's another fun one that you were kind of like, wow, I cannot believe that that was true, like how could that even be true? Or you're like, wow, I thought that was, that's got to be completely false and it is, or something. What's another case that you came across that you felt that way?
So, so you mentioned Dahmer. So, Dahmer is an interesting case because
Hmm.
personally, I believe that if we had systems in place, I don't think Dahmer would have done what he ended up doing. I
Hmm.
think a lot of that is a failure of society because, of course, during this time, this is happening in the late 70s, early 80s, right? A lot of
Hmm.
his murders and stuff. This is also during the time where, AIDS is now coming into prominence in the United States, that, people are really afraid of the gay plague. And
Hmm.
so, you have these cops that are terrified to go around these homosexual men because they're afraid that they're going to get some crazy disease. So these
Right.
cops are not doing their job because they are, you know, I don't know what the term would be. Anyway, they don't like gay people at the time, right?
Right.
So they're very hesitant to have anything to do with them. That's why we see when Konarak is there, they give him back to Dahmer because they don't
Right.
want to have anything to do with this guy that is obviously walking around bleeding from his head, is naked, bleeding from his anus. And they're like, oh, yeah, just go back with your boyfriend because we don't want to have anything to do with you. Because if we get your blood on us, we may end up with AIDS, right? And
Right.
so it's such a sad time in our history that would allow
Mhm.
these things to go on, and
Yeah.
on top of that, like Dahmer was really, really had a lot of serious issues from his childhood. If
Mhm.
there were programs and if there were people that could have guided him through that, he may have not killed anybody. He was
Right.
someone who had serious issues that was hurting and could not figure out how to deal with all of these darker feelings that he had. Had he
Right.
had somebody that understood and that could work with him, maybe that would have been
Mhm.
different. Also, they needed to make sure he wasn't drinking because the guy drank like a fish, right? He was
Right.
drunk 90% of the time. So that certainly doesn't help when you're talking about your mental status and you are a functioning alcoholic and maybe not so functioning. But, the other thing is that really was something that I wanted to get into in the book is the fact that, Dahmer, we always think about him like, uh, there there's a lot of talk that Dahmer was racist, right? Because he killed ethnic people, right?
Mhm.
And a high percentage of the people that he killed were African American, some type of Asian descent. Uh, but that's not really true. That's not why Dahmer
Mhm.
killed, right? Dahmer killed because he didn't want people to leave him, right?
Yes, I
So
agree.
he killed because he loved those people and he
Mhm.
didn't understand that you don't have to murder somebody to get them to stay with you forever, right? And
Right.
people can't do that, right? It's a very extreme form of being controlling, right? Like the most extreme form of controlling, where you
Right.
have people that are, you have really abusive people that you can't go outside, you can't go and hang out with these people, you can't do this because I can't have you away from me. Now, again, I'm not saying that any of that is right. It's obviously not right, it's wrong, but
Mhm.
it is an extreme form of that control. They were leaving and he felt like he had to kill them to get them to stay, and I don't think he always wanted to kill them, at least not in the beginning. When he started
Right.
drugging people, he was obviously going to end their life. I mean, there was no other option. But for Dahmer, it's like he killed what he coveted. He killed what he
Right.
loved, and I make this point in the book, and they actually, when we did the editing process, they had me kind of back off of it a little bit because I
Uh-huh.
made a statement early on that
Okay.
I feel like Dahmer, by doing that, was not being racist, but being he was killing what he loved, and it's kind of a crazy, crazy way to think about life, and it's exactly inverse to what normal people would think. Right? Normal
Right.
people, you love someone, you want to hold them, you want to keep them close, but for him, because he also liked things that were like he had these early experiences with animals and stuff and played with dead things all the time. He also had problems getting aroused if somebody wasn't knocked out. So,
Mhm.
this is very similar to Dennis Nielsen, who was over in the UK, who was another one, very, very similar case to Dahmer. He
Oh,
would
okay.
be somebody that would like put powder on himself and he would like set up a mirror and watch himself and like masturbate while he believed that he was a corpse, right? That's how he got aroused. And it's just
Oh,
like obviously something in there got crossed at some
right.
point during his development. For Dennis Nielsen, it was apparently going to his grandfather's funeral and seeing the corpse laying there in the coffin. He felt
Oh.
some kind of strange connection to it and some weird kind of arousal to the dead body laying there. And that carried through the rest of his life. That's
Hmm.
not dissimilar to what Dahmer felt. And
Right.
that's why he preferred people that were unconscious. He could do what he wanted to them. And, I don't know. Like, it's such a
It was,
weird thing.
and I honestly, I agree with you 100% about Dahmer. I think if he had the proper therapy and psychological evaluations and monitoring, he
Yeah.
wouldn't have done what he did. His whole meaning of killing people and drugging them so he could do what he want. He was very insecure. He had abandonment issues. So
Yeah.
that's why he was like, and then with him trying to like eat and consume body parts from his victims, he did that because he felt that they were even closer to
Yeah.
him. It's not like he killed because he enjoyed the act of killing. He was trying to feed his own need of abandonment issues. And,
Yeah.
like you said, if he had the proper care, I mean, his dad, Lyle, tried so much with Jeffrey. And, he was always a square peg in a round world. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? That's how he was. And
I,
he probably started drinking heavily to help with how he was feeling being a homosexual back
yeah.
then, which is not cool. Like you said, you had the whole the AIDS epidemic and everyone calling it the gay plague, which was not true at the time. But I totally agree that, yeah, if he would have had the care. Now his mother, Jeffrey's mother,
Oh, man.
was taken, she was next level crazy.
Oh, yeah,
And
for sure.
she abandoned Jeffrey. She also was on heavy drugs during her pregnancy with Jeffrey. So even Lyle's like, I'm wondering if something like if he got some side effect from all the medications she was
Yeah.
taking during her pregnancy with Jeffrey, that could have messed with the development in his brain. So there
Well,
could, I feel
there's that
bad saying
story.
it, but
Yeah, there's that story of Dahmer going and having that hernia surgery, right? And
uh-huh,
like him being afraid that they were going to cut his penis off. And this
uh-huh,
happened when he was like, I don't know, maybe he was young, maybe like 9, 12, something like that. He was really young when that happened. And
mhm,
it's just a weird association that you would be
right,
worried about that specific thing. So, it's we're all, everybody is a collection of the things that have happened to us in the past and the trauma that we
mhm,
live through. And if we don't find healing from that and we don't take the time to really understand ourselves, there are really bad shit that can happen from that. And,
right,
it's expressed in all kinds of ways. If you have a whole bunch of people that have cheated on you, it's a pretty good bet that you're going to be controlling in your relationships later on. It's just cause and effect. And there are a
mhm,
lot of times where these wires get crossed, especially when we're talking about serial killers in this like sadosexual kind of thing. That there are wires that get crossed early on that give them this compulsion to only be aroused by certain things, and so um, it's really fascinating. And I am currently working on uh, I'm working on like 6 different projects. But one of them is like going in to the childhood of a lot of these different killers and
okay,
seeing like where that comes from and how that
okay,
feeds into who they become later on in life. So kind of
right,
bridging the gap because I personally believe, mainly because of my own upbringing and I worked with children for a long time, understanding that everything starts during those formative years, right? And like, it's why we still, like, you could be 40 years old and you can still hear mom saying nasty shit to you from when you were a kid, right? And we carry that through our whole lives. If mom tells you, God, you're too fat, you need to lose some weight, like, we hear that for the rest of our lives.
Right.
And, for me, it wasn't that. It was always, you're a piece of shit. You're never going to amount to anything. And I still hear that. I'm a best-selling author. I've been on stages and I still deal with that in the back of my mind because of my
Right.
childhood. And knowing that and understanding the associations, I think, can help us later on. So I think it's
Right.
important as far as development goes, and whether it's criminology or therapy, I think we need to understand these things. We need to understand these people so that we can become better at what we're doing, and we can prevent further Jeffrey Dahmers or Ed Geins, or another good example is Eileen Wuornos. I don't believe that she would have done what she did if she didn't have all the drugs and the alcohol and had some good therapy, because she obviously had some serious, issues with men,
Yeah.
and because she was abused by men her entire life, so of course she would lash out at men. And I don't believe that most of them that were doing anything wrong to her, but she was referring all of that past trauma on those men and then blew them away because of it. How
Right.
do we stop some of that?
Right. And yeah, we have to, instead of just going over the case over and over again, what they did, let's learn what they did and learn from that so it doesn't happen again with
Yeah,
somebody else. We always see these, cases that, we always get like these school shootings that pop up in kind of clusters, and it's like, how is this still happening? We need to know what, in talking about it, but we need to know, we need to talk about it. It needs to be in our schools. We need to educate people about mental health and mental
yeah,
issues, because that is usually kind of the catalyst of all of it. It's mental health, especially
yeah,
when it comes to true crime, because from what Jeffrey Dahmer did, what Ed Gein did, what Bathory did, Jack the Ripper did, that's not normal human behavior. So obviously something screwed up in their mind. And what is there some event in their childhood that caused that? Was Jeffrey Dahmer sexually assaulted by a man? And then, he found out he actually liked men, and then gave himself shame. Who knows? There could have been something that you could
yeah.
possibly dig up. So that's a very an interesting book that I'm looking forward to having you back on again. Well, for all your books, because you're awesome. But is there a website or anything that people can go to? Now, I am putting up your link tree,
Yeah.
because you do have multiple things going on, projects and things, but you do have a website specifically for your book. Is that correct?
Yeah, yeah. You can go to Beyond the Headlines truecrime.com, and that'll get you to the book, and hopefully all the subsequent books.
Well,
I'm
yeah.
currently writing the second volume now, and
Okay.
I just got asked to write a chapter for an anthology that's going to be coming out later this year, and so I'll be
Oh,
talking about that, which should be fun. I'm waiting to
yeah.
hear back from the publisher, because it's like, actually, it's kind of funny because the title is similar to the podcast, but it's talking
Oh,
about like different different like things within true crime. And I think that the early idea is that I was going to talk about stalking, BDSM, and control, and the illusion of control in regards to like BTK and the toolbox killers. And
okay.
yeah, so that one will be will be very deep.
Yeah.
Uh,
You got a
there is
lot of
some,
material there to weed through.
yeah, yeah.
Oh,
So,
that's a big one. But yeah,
so
I appreciate you coming on, and this has been fun. And yeah, check out his link tree link. I have it in today's description. I love how you have a serial killer card game. that you can play with serial
So
killers.
it is not just serial killers.
Oh, okay.
Just like I mentioned before, I love kind of like the totality of true crime. And so,
Mm-hmm.
Killers, the card game, which is this side of me right there, Killers, the card game, is exactly that. It's killers from all kinds of different genres. We have an organized crime expansion, which has like Pablo Escobar and John
Okay.
Gotti and a lot of the
Oh.
mafia guys. We
Ooh.
also have a World of Serial Killers, which is obviously all serial killers. We then have a
Okay.
Lady Killers expansion that is all female killers, baby farmers, poisoners, all kinds of stuff in there. Then we have cults, which is obviously all the different cults, and you have like
Yeah.
David Berg with the Children of God. You have Om Shinrikyo that's in there, and of course Jim
Mm-hmm.
Jones and oh my goodness, why Heaven's Gate.
They.
There we go.
Oh yeah, yeah. You got
Yeah,
Bo and whatever. Yeah, Do Re Mi. They call
yeah,
themselves or
yeah.
something. They got David Koresh. Yeah, I'm actually very
So
fascinated with cults. So.
so Koresh is not in there. So I'll tell you the reason, right?
Hmm,
So I was
okay.
going when we started out developing the Colts expansion. The Branch Davidians were going to be part of it. I
Okay.
went to a convention in Champaign, Illinois, called Dark History Con, and I sat
Okay.
down with David Thibodeau. David Thibodeau was David Koresh's number two, right?
Okay.
He was there at the show. We had dinner together, and he is an incredible guy. He has
Mhm.
just done a couple documentaries about the whole Waco thing,
Mhm.
and the reason why I took them out is because I wanted cults that had killed. And
Oh,
even
gotcha.
though the Branch Davidians did kill people, they did not do that willingly. Like they never
No,
intended to kill anybody. They were shot at by the government, and they
yep.
returned fire, killing people. And so
Yeah, it was self-defense.
I consciously took them out because of
Okay.
my meeting with David Thibodeau. And if you ever get a chance to check out anything that David does, he does some incredible stuff. Check it out. He's got a couple
Okay.
books and documentaries out there that I have on my shelf. So he's just super cool guy.
Oh,
So yeah,
maybe
we have
we'll
the
have to
Colts.
explore that. We'll
Yeah,
have to explore
and
the
then we
Branch Davidians.
and then we have Mass Murderers, which
Okay.
that expansion is wild. So that expansion, you actually don't play as the Mass Murderers. The Mass Murderers, you have to kill them before they kill everybody else. So you have
Oh,
like Pol
gotcha.
Pot is in there, Hitler is in there, and the majority of the school shooters are in there, right?
Okay.
So we lump everybody in there. And actually, my favorite card, like my favorite one in that, and I have a very dark sense of humor, and so
Uh-huh.
we have Omar Mateen is in that, and of course he's the Pulse nightclub shooter, right? And
Okay.
so if Omar Mateen rolls a natural one, uh, he realizes he's gay and he can no longer kill
Oh,
because
okay.
that was the whole story behind that, right?
Yeah, he
He
didn't
like
like
went
gay people.
well, he didn't like gay people, but he was probably gay himself, right?
Yeah.
He attended Pulse nightclub a ton and hooked up with
Yep.
guys there, but then he like again, it's a cultural thing, right? That is
Right.
not something in their culture that is acceptable. And so he could never deal with himself. And this should prove to us how dangerous it is when we as a culture don't allow people to express themselves the way that they feel like expressing themselves. And bad things
Exactly.
happen when you do that. So, and that is not that long ago, right? We're only talking what 3 or 4 years that happened,
Yeah, it
maybe
was.
5 years
Yeah,
ago now. Yeah, it's
right.
crazy.
Yeah, it wasn't that long ago. Well, thank
Yeah.
you so much, Jeff, for coming on. It was fun going over this stuff. We'll definitely have you back on again. And again, today the book is Beyond the Headlines: True Crime, Myth and Legends. We'll have a link for that in today's description. And please, listeners, rate and review the books. It helps these authors get their books seen by more people searching for new true crime books. And that's how Dave came across yours. And he's like, I know Jeff, so let's get him on the show. And I was like, perfect. And there you go. So yes, I'm looking forward to reading this book, and I hope you guys are too. And if you guys read the book and you love it, send me, email me at mysteriesmayhemmerlow@gmail.com. I'd be happy to pass it along to Jeff as well, saying, hey, the readers are enjoying what you got. And I love how you laid out the book. It's very new. It's an interesting way to look at it, and it engages the readers. And I wish you nothing but the best for this book. I'm going to push hard for this because I find it very interesting. And if I like it, I like sharing that with the world as well. So
Thank you.
thank you so much. And thank you guys all for tuning in. And I'll see you guys next week.
Hey, before we go, I have a special request today. It's about our dear friend Chris Fleming. Chris has been a beacon of light in the paranormal community, sharing his incredible gifts as a medium and a psychic with so many of us. He has given so much of himself, helping people connect with loved ones, offering guidance, and shining light on mysteries of the unknown. But now Chris needs our help. Whether you've been touched by his work or just want to support someone who has dedicated his life to helping others, this is the time to give back. Every little bit counts, whether it's a donation, spreading the word, or sending positive thoughts his way, or even purchasing his art that he has up on Etsy. Let's rally together and show Chris the love and support he's shown us over the years. You'll find all the details in today's program guide, or you can scan the QR code that you see on the screen. Thank you for being such an amazing community, and let's make a difference for Chris. Thank you for joining me for another episode of Mysteries, Mayhem, and Merlot. And until our next case, my armchair detectives, stay safe, stay vigilant, and stay aware. I'll see you right here next week on Mysteries, Mayhem, and Merlot.